Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on increasing consumer trust in digital retailing. My name is Heath Emerson, Digital Retailing Sales Manager at NETSOL Technologies, and I have over 20 years of experience in automotive, having started off in retail myself. Joining me today is David Kain from NCM Associates. David's had a long career in automotive himself, but I'll let him give you a little bit more background to his unique experience and perspective. David?
It'd be great. Well, thank you for having me, Heath. It's always fun to get on a broadcast, particularly when it has to involve something that a lot of people still feel like is the future. But interesting enough, way back in the year 2000, I worked for Ford Direct as the chief operating officer, and we introduced digital retailing way back then. But I got my start in our family's Ford dealership. I'm a dealer's kid, if you will, and worked with my 8 brothers and sisters and did that until I left to go do the joint venture with Ford Motor Company as Ford and Ford dealers, created Ford Direct. And then after that, I created a training company and ran that for 20 years until NCM purchased me or our company. And now I'm a senior advisor and I help with programs like what we're doing with NETSOL. So it's wonderful to have an opportunity to talk to you.
Oh, and it's always excellent to have a chance to talk with you, David, especially about these topics we're going to go through today. And speaking of which, the topic of today being increasing consumer trust in digital retailing. Some of this has been more recent. We start with COVID really spurring things off and see a shift in the consumer shopping preferences, especially around the tools that we're using. And I know you can go pretty far back here with Ford Direct, and you've got some time in there. You've seen these tools evolve. How do you see that playing out currently, coming forward from COVID to current state,
Yeah.
and what that next step looks like for dealers?
Yeah. So I think COVID gave us an accelerant to really leverage, particularly in those states that shut down and dealers were still trying to make it easy for consumers to buy. I remember a lot of our clients literally would stand at the door and say, if you'll go to your phone, you can go ahead and we'll work the deal right there on your phone and build it forward. And then they do the transaction remotely, just a few feet on the other side of the glass. So that is not what you would consider digital retailing per se. Most people think that it's the person sitting in their kitchen or on their couch or in their office and they're finding the vehicle that they're interested in and going through all of the math and the financing and all those elements. But the truth of the matter is, and I think you and I during our pre-work for this alluded to a Cox Automotive study, and still even to this day, less than 10% of people actually want to or do purchase the whole vehicle online. And I'm not a purist. I'm not a believer that says, well, if they didn't buy it completely online and you did the forms and everything remotely, it's not an online purchase. Candidly, I think progressive dealers are like, look, if they want to start online and they want to finish in the showroom or at their home, that's still digital retail. And I think the smart dealers are in a position, and let me correct that. Every dealer is smart in their own market. They want to do what's best. But what we found is dealers that really embrace digital retailing don't worry about, is it a purist move to where they've got to do everything online? They just want to help the customer. And I love that word trust, because if they trust the technology and they trust the dealer, particularly the professional that they're working with, this thing works really well. And people will break trust with poor emails, poor phone calls, poor text. And so I think it's imperative that every dealership really embraces that trust quotient so that they can move the customer forward.
I couldn't agree more. You touched on a couple key things there, communication and processes being essential for meeting the customer expectation, especially that transition. Like you said,
Yes.
the difficult transition coming from online shopping where it's comfortable and consumers are spending dozens of hours doing their research before they go into the store, and what that experience changes when they get into the store. Now, we've seen that change over the years, and it's going to continue to evolve. But how do you see the more progressive stores leading that charge, and what kind of changes do you see implementing in the stores over the next few years?
Yeah, I think there's these strategies where salespeople might sit here and say, "Well, I'm just good on the phone, or I'm just good on the floor." When I'm working with someone who's my junior, and I'm up there now in age and experience, and then they'll say, "Well, I'm only going to be selling for another 10 years." I'm like, "You won't be if you don't embrace digital retail." So, first off, we've got to make sure they understand this is the path the consumer has chosen. And to some degree, the manufacturer has chosen that, or even third parties have chosen. We see Cox Automotive, and they've got where the consumer can go and start the buying process online. We see a lot of third parties moving in that direction. So it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. I don't think we're going to. And the progressive dealers really start with the objectors and say, look, do you really want to work here if you don't want to sell the way the consumer wants to buy? What are you going to say to them? Well, I'm not a guy who really wants to help you, if you want to do the whole transaction online. I wouldn't say that. You and I both sell cars, and that's the craziest thing you can imagine. So what we would do is we would say, whatever works for you, sir, ma'am, that's really what we're working towards. So if you want to do partial online, you want to do everything online, we're here to meet your needs.
Oh, absolutely. And David, the disconnect in that process, where do you see the biggest, I hate to say faults, but areas for improvement when that customer is first coming into the store for dealers?
Yeah. So first coming into the store, let's explain that a little bit because you and I both probably agree with this. Coming in digitally is equivalent to coming in physically. So, from the standpoint of the customer who says, I've been shopping your dealership for weeks, some salespeople who are physically oriented will say, well, I've never seen you in here. Who are you working with? And they're like, no, I've been working digitally. I've been all over your lot. I know all your inventory. I've got all the prices, payments, and trade values. So what we're seeing to some degree, sadly, is customers are pushing salespeople forward. I've always learned that if you walk with your guest, you can accomplish great things together. So, progressive dealers candidly train all of their team members to embrace the digital customer and put themselves in a position where they understand the technology. And then when you do an equivalence and you say, what do you do? Where do you buy stuff when you leave here? And they're like, oh, of course, I buy online. I go here so sometimes you've just got to help them break down those barriers because they might have a blind spot for where they are in the work setting, but when they go home, it's all the world's different.
Absolutely. And I mean, that really holds true with the studies that we've seen in the industry. About half of customers are still going to do all the steps in store, but the other half are a mix of customers that want to do some of the steps online, more to save time, the efficiency, but to also prepare themselves for that sometimes cautious interaction.
Yeah. Well, it is so interesting, and you're familiar with the mini environment. My wife had driven a Mini Cooper for a really long time, and she wanted a new one. And so I had interaction. I'd been online and I asked for video, I asked for all the financial documents. Then we showed up, and one of the things that I shared with the person I'd been interacting with is this is going to be in my wife's name. So I want her name first. I'll be on there. She's retired now, so she doesn't have the stream of income. And then Heath, we walked in, and my name was all over every document. And they were like, "Well, it doesn't really matter." And that's the worst thing you can say to a spouse or a significant other is, "Oh, it doesn't really matter. That's just the way the paperwork is." That did not resonate well. And I was more upset perhaps than my wife, who might be used to that kind of treatment. But imagine going back to your 50-50 rule. If we did 50%, in that case, we'd done 80% online, I'd kind of just want to walk in, get the car, and go. But it didn't work out that way because old biases and old strategies persisted. And I think we need to polish up that behavior in the store so that the consumer achieves their goals along with the dealership. Because what we found, and you mentioned you're from Washington State, one of our clients that we work with there, their digital retailing is off the charts. It is their primary breadwinner, and the consumers love it. They love it. Their tagline is "Buy Your Way." And it's remarkable what that does to give the customer confidence and to get the team members to where they're like, "Oh, I need to sell your way." And it works really well.
David, you bring up another great point there. I always love these conversations. That dealer, and I know who you're referring to pretty well. They've done something that I don't see on average in the industry, and that's really go back and brand the experience.
Yes.
Brand it, explain it to build that trust. And that's really the essential thing that we're trying to achieve here with those customers.
You triggered a thought in my mind. We have one other client that is very effective in digital retailing, and they branded theirs Fast Buy. So it is interesting what you do internal, almost like if you wear the button on your chest that says, "Ask me about Fast Buy," or whatever. You create a culture with that. And, people might use one tool that you and I have seen. There's a complexity of tools out there, but ultimately the dealership has to create their culture, their branding, their strategy. And the tool is critical. As we all know, it's got to be easy for the consumer, easy for the team, but the embracing of it, God, that really resonated with me when you brought that up.
It takes time. In my experience, I've got a little less experience than you in automotive, but we see a lot of tools that have come out, and just internally, working on the retail side, if we don't use them, it's a waste. And I hate to say forced usage, but forced utilization, improved utilization of the tools, and simplification of the tools across the board, but specifically to simplify the dealer's portion,
Yes,
is of pretty bare area. Quite honestly, we see everything really focused in the market towards the consumer, rightfully so. We understand why, but the additional consideration for the dealers on how to navigate how many tabs, how many screens open for an average deal right now, 20, 25, and simplifying that down for dealers where things that we can automate are getting automated, and streamlining the processes so that they can align with that online process, just the same in the store. So there's other tools that we're going to see to increase, customers continuing to use those tools, and go from that 50% up to that 80%, like you said, trying to do most, if not all, of their shopping online, which really starts with having the tools available, right?
Yes.
You got to have the tools available. So a lot of the digital retailing tools, and that's even a pretty wide area as we look at all the digital retailing companies in the space, they're all a little bit different.
They are.
The consumer journey is pretty similar, but what they focus on is a little different in each area and how they come to the market with it. And I see a lot of differences and a lot of similarities there, but just looking at the market in general, where do you see the biggest dealer opportunities moving forward with digital retailing?
Well, I think removing the barrier for the typical sales professional to interact with the tools, whether it's giving them access to a laptop or a tablet that allows them to do it. Our very best digital retailing tool for dealer for close rate, they do EMI, which everybody listening will know, early management interaction, and the deal is worked right there in front of the guest, whether a manager is on the computer or the sales professionals on the computer. The guest, and what we've taught in our teaching, is turn it around and tell them, touch, adjust, change your down payment, adjust your trade value. Where do you want to be? And so I don't think salespeople are objectors to this. I think what happens, and sadly, I don't want to cast aspersions against mid-level managers, but imagine this world. I'm a mid-level manager. I worked my way up, and now all of a sudden I got to learn digital retail. Come on, man. I was enjoying it. I could leave at 2 o'clock and go golfing and, then come back and close for the day. But now I got to learn this new complex environment. And sadly, it's not complex. It is portrayed that way. And I think the best digital retailing companies remove the complexity on the user interface. I have a client, and they work with a CRM tool, and there's a lot of them out there. And I said, "How come you use that one?" He goes, "My team loves to use it." And I think if you're a developer of digital retailing tools, you've got to make sure that from the user standpoint at the store, it's got to be equivalently easy for the sales professional as it is for the consumer.
Absolutely. Going back to what I was saying earlier, and that focus on improving the dealer experience,
Yes.
and not just the customer experience. Dealers know very well how to provide a great experience to a customer.
Yeah.
How can we simplify that and make it easier for them to achieve that? And there's a few tools out there that we see, but I think the biggest one, and everybody's kind of pushing towards it, is generative AI chatbots, and a lot of hopes, I would say, in relying on some of those to fill what may otherwise be a staffing or a software deficiency in a store. And interested to see or hear what your take is on that in current use, and how you think that might be better used for dealers going forward.
Well, I think it's remarkable what it will do for communications. And, interesting enough, my brother is the manager, sales manager at our family's dealership. And he communicated with me, and then he let the generative AI take over. And I was just texting with my brother. The AI picked up on the little nuances because, you pick on your brother or you pick on your siblings, right? So I was giving him a hard time, and I was talking about my other siblings. AI, the generative AI, took over and literally made it sound like my brother had met me point by point, and I had no clue that it wasn't my brother communicating. And so then he revealed, he goes, "Oh my God, did that freak you out what the AI just did. And I was like, yes, very much so. So, I know that there's going to be some people who are not real comfortable with that. Uh,
Absolutely.
but I think we got to make sure we don't rely on it 100%. But boy, when it comes to ongoing task, or if I've got 100 people in my personal database that I'm trying to uh, incentivize to come in, I might not be able to write individual text or emails to excite them. But if AI really doesn't care, I mean, they might go through and say, "You said you like this red car. Just turns out that we've got another one coming in." I'd be like, "Oh, that sure made my life easier. Take it away. I'll help them when they're ready."
Absolutely. Anything to help the efficiency, and that's really where I've seen AI become, have the biggest impact is improving efficiency, not
Yes.
replacing, but simplifying otherwise complex and redundant tasks. Because that first email to the customer generally is about the same from the
Mhm.
first one you send to the 10,000th one you send.
Yes.
You know, but back here, sorry. The the nice thing about that, and you're right, I've been doing research for school. I'm working on my doctorate, and around AI, it's not meant to be relied on. It definitely will have a lot more uses, but there's a trust factor there.
Yeah.
And are we communicating that to the customer, letting them know it's an assistant up front, or are we doing what we used to do with chats, even if it was an outsourced chat, and having a persona there? Because the
Yeah.
nice thing about those AIs is you can create a persona, perhaps to go along with that branding to support the experience.
Yeah, there's no question. It's interesting. You shared with me that because there was no automotive doctorate that was available, you're looking at healthcare and doing your dissertation in that area. My doctor said, "I hope you don't mind. I'm going to let AI transcribe what we're talking about, and we're finding that it reduces fatigue and it allows us to more accurately capture everything that we've talked about." And I don't think we should sit here and just throw ourselves over and say, AI is way better than we are. I mean, we invented it. But at the same point, I just hosted a meeting in my home here for our homeowners association. And she goes, "Who's going to take notes?" And I said, "Otter AI is going to take notes." And she was blown away because we got everything. It gave us a summary, and she's like, "That's what I'm using from now on." So,
Especially when you're in a lot of meetings, and
oh
I know you
yeah,
are.
yeah,
Definitely makes it a lot easier to compile and then pass that word, transmit that back out to everybody instead of having to do that manually and taking the time to do it. AI
yes.
definitely can streamline operations when used appropriately.
Yeah, and think in terms of if I complete my interaction with a guest, wouldn't it be nice if I could leave a note for myself? And I think that's where it becomes, that boost and the barriers, the fear goes away when people are like, "Oh, that I just tell it what I just did and it takes over." Uh, I think we're going to see some really interesting things happen there, and it'll be interesting where NETSOL goes with respect to your all's future development. I'm really anxious to participate in that.
I'm looking forward to that to coming out fairly soon. And it's
Yeah.
going to be a fun ride. AI's definitely has a lot of potential, especially within in the dealership, that I think hasn't been tapped into yet. Or we just haven't identified it fully because it's somewhat a new tool for to dealers to leverage as it
Yeah.
becomes increasingly more accurate and have less issues because we don't want
Yeah.
the obviously trying to give a car away for $1. I think
Yeah,
pretty
no
much everybody saw
question.
that. But that's what happens sometimes when you put the powered by Chat GPT on there.
Yeah. I want to comment on in dealership behavior. So as we're talking, I remembered years ago I was in Greater Philadelphia and I was working with Pacifico Marple Ford, and they said, "Don't worry about working with him. He hates computers. He doesn't want to have anything to do with it." And I said, "Well, I'm about his age. Why don't I go talk to him?" And so he goes, "If I've got to work on the computer, I'm just going to quit. I'm going to get out of the car business." So I said, "Well, let me show you what you can do with it." And sure enough, we created his login, social media accounts, and so on and so forth. Next time I was there, uh, I said, "Why are you in such a bad mood?" He goes, "My computer is in the shop, and if they don't get it back soon, I'm going to quit." I was like, okay, we've created a monster here.
Oh, that's amazing. We see that, especially when we've been trained or we've had the opportunity just to have this habit for a long time of one way of doing things. I see that more evident on the DMS side, where
Yes.
dealers are very reluctant to change on the DMS because they've used it for 20, 30, 40
Yeah.
plus years.
Yeah, it's definitely the devil they know.
It is. And, I hate to cast any shadows, but there was a pretty big incident earlier this year with one of the providers,
Yes.
and that had enormous impact on sales, which some were predicting a little over $1 billion
Wow.
over those 2 weeks, just from the decreased sales volume that would have typically taken place. Now, that would have been picked up on the back end, but
Some of it, yeah, some of it,
yeah.
but like for example, vehicle repairs and parts, and there's a lot of a lot of tentacles in a dealership, and that use of technology needs to be consistently applied throughout. And I think going back a few years, you would walk through the shop and the technicians all had computers. And they were like, "Oh, I love it. I don't have to walk to the parts counter. I get to do everything back here." And then you walk on the sales floor, nobody had computers. They're pad and paper, and I don't want to do any of that. It's starting. We're starting to see it, particularly with progressive dealers are very much almost enamored with the technology and what it can do for them. But back to your point about, that DMS issue, it's it's equivalent to that word trust that we started this whole dialogue with. It's so fragile. And you can be clipping along and doing really good. Everybody trusts it. And then lo and behold, some sort of an issue breaks down. Trust is fragile. And I think that was a good learning lesson for a lot of dealers is, maybe we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket and we need to consider a diversity of technology.
Absolutely. And more tools are coming to fill that need, but there's nothing quite like the DMS out there other than the core handful that we really see
Yeah.
owning the market. But the security around that and the once that hit the news,
Yes.
it wasn't just for dealers. It stopped impacting just dealers internally for their operations and started impacting consumers.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up because consumers, I've been around long enough to where we've had production strikes, train car shortages, parts shortages, all kinds of issues. But pull the plug on a dealer management system, and that affects the consumer. They now are walking into the store and the guy says, "Oh, we're going to do it on a tablet, or we're going to use a spreadsheet, or but don't worry, we're going to figure up your bill and stuff, or we're going to calculate your payments." Consumers, they expressed it, and they would go to another store, and we started hearing consumers say, "Are you all part of that management system shortage?" They didn't say DMS. We didn't get them
Mm.
that oriented, but they would say, "Is your computer, is your program up to speed? Because I don't want to go through this if you can't help me."
That makes sense. And that's a great example of the consumer impact that we have to address as well when those incidents occur. Sometimes, and if it was a dealer that was impacted, were any of them reaching out to confirm that with their customers that their information was safe, or
Yeah.
letting them know that the operations were limited because of the system outage? That's hard to recover from, especially like you said, that parts and service work. If you need your car fixed, you
Yeah.
need your car fixed, right?
Yeah. Could I ask you a question? Because you're definitely digital native, right? I'm almost immune to the emails, the messages I get that say there's been a data breach. Um, Big deal. My password's compromised. I've got all the protections available, but what is the future of that? And when you think about digital retailing and tools and dealerships, we've gone broader than just digital retailing. How do you, does the customer just kind of be like, oh, well, I just expect it to break? What's the advantage of not having the technology that's at risk?
Well, that's a great question, David. When it comes to the security aspect of it, a couple things that I noticed just looking through dealer websites quite often is we don't really do a good job of communicating that there
Yeah.
is a level of security, that there's some type of industry certification protecting the consumer's information. Usually that's limited around the credit application.
Yes.
So communicating that is the first part, letting them know letting the
Yeah.
customer know that it's there and that they are being protected. Having a clear communication strategy when there is an event, even if it doesn't affect your store, because the customer doesn't know that. So for everybody that wasn't affected, they got the benefit of it. But if they didn't let their
Yeah.
customers know, the customers may be holding back for a couple weeks or however long the outage goes for, because they're unsure and they don't want to have to drive all the way into the store and then find out that you can't help them, because
Yeah.
it's an inconvenience. So there's a lot of different things that occur when we have those instances. And I just touched on a couple things. What else can a dealer do other than, eliminating paperwork and moving to a full digital process and,
Hmm.
changing out passwords? From a software side, there are services out there for information security. For NETSOL, we've done a lot of work for lenders and other businesses around the world, and some of that work has been into information security and protecting consumers' credit applications,
Yes.
personal information, where it's absolutely critical for that security to be there. And we found just those things that I was just talking about hold true, that you have to communicate it to the customer. Whether you're
Hmm.
impacted or not, you should be communicating to the customer so that you can increase that trust through transparency.
Yeah. It's interesting. Back when we first started using websites and we were putting personal data in, we were looking for the closed lock. Uh, I doubt
Yep.
anybody looks for the closed lock anymore. But the fact of the matter is, if you're requesting their data, I think it's important to get that across in the form or in the dialogue if I'm using chat or something to that effect to make sure they understand, I just want to tell you right up front, your information is secure. We've got these certifications for data security. Now, I'll share this. I know a lot of providers are like, I'm not going to say that because we could get hit next. So I do think there is a little bit of fear of jinxing.
Hmm.
And then superstitions are alive and well in the automotive industry.
Knock
We
on
have to
wood.
admit that, right? So, you just hope, well, on Monday it was them, next week it could be me. But what I love is our clients who have a really rigid system in place to make sure that their team members are able to convey that in common language to the customer.
Mhm.
And, going back to that word trust, it seems like it just hangs over our head. Um, we've been in business 30 years, 50 years, whatever it is, your security, your data is preeminent and important to us. So we're going to make sure it's taken care of. Shoot, we want to go to sleep at night. So we want to make sure that your information is secure.
Absolutely. We already got enough keeping us up at night. We don't need another
Yeah.
data breach to add on top of that. But that again, great point. The compliance aspect of it definitely is always going to be hanging over a dealer's head if there is, something that's specifically to the dealer for a breach. Now, thankfully, we
Yes.
don't hear about that often. If it's pretty rare, but the
Yes.
larger companies, the vendors that support the dealers, that's where it's most at risk. Now, the monitoring on the dark web, that ends up being essential and almost needs to be integrated through just really throughout the industry to monitor not only employees' login credentials that you're managing as the dealer because you have 46 vendors and they all have different logins.
Yes.
Uh, that's a pretty tough task to stay on top of without software to support that in both the monitoring and the notification so that the information is kept secure at all times. Because
Yeah, it's interesting. I got a buddy who gave me his new book. It's his name's Tom Klein, and he's an industry expert. I think his company's Better Vantage Point, but he wrote a book, and it's called Tuck the Octopus. So, the visual is I've got an octopus, I'm trying to tuck it in somewhere. You can't because you move this one tentacle and the other one, goes someplace else. And when you think about compliance, oh my God, most dealers, they'll sign up with a provider and there is that confidence they get. Well, didn't pay too little, didn't pay too much. Looked like they knew what they were doing, even though how do I judge that? I mean, as a dealer, how do I even do it? So, I guess from my standpoint, that's why I like companies like NETSOL that have been involved for so long in finance and in the most secure environments with financial institutions. That's really the crux of it. So, I'm of an age now to where I want to be protective of what I've accumulated. I'm not 20 anymore. Then I could be a little bit reckless, but now it's like, I better make sure I'm working with somebody who knows what they're doing.
it's funny how we change over the years like
Yeah.
that, but completely right on that. It's essential for both the customer and the store, but it really comes back to the perspective.
Yeah.
And anytime that we have issues that are out in the public, um, we have to be proactive, take the extra steps, but also make sure that we ourselves are protecting that customer information. And
Yes.
going back to what we started off a little earlier on, that's part of the branding. That's part of
Yeah.
branding the experience, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And, in this area of digital retail, I think organically it's going to continue to evolve and to grow. Consumers are just pushing it. I like to do this comparison. So I go to Kroger, that's our local grocery store. They've nearly shut down all of the full service lanes. And then I look over and we're near a university and all the students are self-checking. And I'm like, and I'm doing it too, obviously, because, depending on what it is, but I've got a big cart, I'm letting them check me out. But what's interesting is we've almost created this self-service environment to where, oh, I don't need a car salesperson. I don't need a car sales professional. I just need quality interactive technology for me to be able to serve myself. And yeah, I want to know that it will tow 5,000 pounds. And I want to know that the analog brakes are going to provide me additional security and all of those areas where you're the expert on the product. But when it comes to the technology, shoot, if I know how to check myself out, I'm pretty okay with that. And maybe I trust the technology when I'm calculating my payment, adding on additional services and such, more than I would you sitting there with a piece of paper and saying, well, you need this, and just in case, some catastrophe happens, let me watch the video. Let me make that decision myself. Oh,
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things I remember starting off in the business a few years ago, and one issue I see there is it's the rate of the information. People can only consume so
oh
much over
yeah.
so long. So customers, rightfully so, with the gravity of the purchase for them, they take that time, and it's little by little accumulating that 34, 35, 38 hours of research so
Yeah.
that they feel comfortable to come in and sit across from a desk or stand across more so an iPad nowadays
Yes.
to discuss a vehicle. So that change has been quite big since I first got in the store when I was just get them in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no question. And it is interesting. We haven't talked about that aspect of it is from that mid-level manager standpoint. I think that's going to be the next step in process development is how willing are they to interact and going back to that early management introduction, particularly from a remote standpoint, if I can even consider, we can do a screen share, we can do something like that. That becomes really powerful. And I think technologies that are considering that, or if we use a FaceTime, we'll walk through it together. We call it co-navigating. And when
Mhm.
you can navigate with me, we're accumulating trust because I'm seeing what you're seeing. And, if it's right there in front of me, as opposed to the old Foursquare where I've got the marker and I'm, trying to intimidate you and say, you get to pick one of those blocks, but I get to pick the other three or whatever. I mean, it's just like the consumer's thinking something's going to happen to me and not thinking it's the right thing. So, yeah, it is. I think what we're going to have to do is get away from that. Just get them in to let's see how far we can move them down this journey remotely. And
Mhm.
then the more we get our team comfortable with that, what we've seen with the dealer in Washington State is their profit improves the further the customer feels comfortable going down the path. And that wasn't what they expected, but it certainly is what the truth was.
Now that's amazing to hear, and I really think that speaks to how the customers react when we make those shifts to accommodate their preferences and
Yeah.
make it easy for them to not only just communicate but transact. Because while we put a big focus on the sales side, services just as impacted, with a lot of this as well, and they're getting more involved in the digital retailing platforms to where dealers can start having true omni-channel experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a key word we've heard for a long time. But the technology is getting to the point where that's easily, well, I wouldn't say easily. It's a lot easier than having to do it from scratch because the tools are there to fuel it. It's a
Yeah.
matter of connecting the dots and enabling the teams to have those tools so that they can provide that higher level of experience
Yeah.
for just I know we're running short on time, but uh, final thought there that really goes to where we see AI positioning itself,
Hmm.
helping with the efficiency so that dealers can really focus just more on the customer and their employees
Yeah.
and really take some of the thinking out of what's the next step in this process. It's been vetted, it's being addressed, either automation, just intelligent automation with the design, or with some AI support to allow the dealer more time, right?
Yes. Well, and the comfort of AI is going to be born from that next generation. We see kids using the AI in school. Chat GTP or GPT can help somebody graduate from college because the information's right there at hand. I think it's going to become. I remember when they first gave us the calculators and we were like, that's cheating, and I'm sure whoever came off the abacus to a calculator was like, it just doesn't seem right. But technology is growing by leaps and bounds, but for whatever reason, humans tend to corral it. And, as nerve-wracking as potential uses of AI are, I think in this kind of a field, particularly to support efficiency and communications, to make it easier for the consumer to self-serve and move forward, I think AI is going to play a big role in this.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more on that, David. Well, I think that brings us time for today. Really appreciate your time again, David. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, especially about topics that I honestly just love talking about. The digital retailing. Been doing automotive for just a little bit now, but it's always invigorating to get a chance to speak with somebody like yourself, David. So appreciate your input today.
Yeah, and Heath, I'll say this. I trust you to create a better environment for the future. So please keep that going. I think you're doing a great job.
I will do that. I am certainly working my best on that right now, sir.
Awesome.
Well, I appreciate your time, David. Thank you for everybody attending today. There will be a couple of handouts following and to support. Please, if you have any questions or would like to reach out to David and myself, you'll find our contact information in the slide following. So hope everybody enjoyed the session. Take care and happy selling.